Hey, what's up everybody, this is Subscriber1 and today I want to bring you a new build, and as you saw at the beginning of the video, this build does a ton of damage because it is using the SVD, which is one of just the pure highest DPS weapons in the game. I've done a build pretty similar to this with the SVD, but this build is a lot better put together and definitely has some differences. So that takes us to our weapons. Now, the main weapon we are going to be using is an SVD, and the reason you use an SVD is because it has the higher RPM like a normal rifle, but it has the pretty good damage and the headshot damage bonus that marksman rifles get, which is 130% headshot damage, which is what makes this build do so ridiculously high DPS. And this specific SVD was actually sold by the secret vendor Cassie Mendoza, and she's not currently selling it, but she should be selling it within the next couple of weeks. I bought like 5 of these things just to keep around if I need to roll them any differently. And the main talent I have is Ranger, which I rolled onto it. This is definitely going to be the best talent for this build. This is one of the best weapon talents in the game and is probably going to be the best after the upcoming patch, and it has accuracy on it, which is the best talent for this weapon, because the one thing about the SVD is that it's pretty wild to use, so you want to get as much accuracy and stability as you want, and the third perk really doesn't matter. So for the attachments, now in the video or at the start of the video where I was showing higher DPS, I will show DPS with this sight that I use mostly, and then the higher damage digital scope. Now the issue with actually using scopes, these high headshot damage scopes, with the gear I'm currently using is for some reason, anytime I crit the farther back targets in the range with my Ranger perk on this weapon with the high headshot damage scopes, it seems to insta-kill those. It does enough to just kill the target, but it completely removes my DPS and just puts my DPS as the last damage I hit for whatever reason, so it pretty much resets my DPS. So it was actually hard to get a DPS that didn't just reset by it doing that. It seems to be a glitch, but I was able to do over 4 million DPS with whatever sight, if it's a sight that has the actual zoom in at the side and you're able to zoom in with it. And for this attachment, for the magazine attachment, just stability. I don't have a lot of other options for this, but the best is definitely stability. You want the stability and accuracy. For this, I did laser pointer, 5% critical hit chance. Now, if you want more stability or accuracy, I would definitely recommend using these. For the actual damage at the target range, I use the critical hit chance, but I usually do switch out to stability or accuracy, usually probably accuracy for this one actually. And the reason that is because this last part I will usually put to the stability that gives a -10 optimal range, because we really don't need that range, and the 20% stability is pretty good. Now if you're wanting more damage, go the damage to elites. I did use this as a target range because I don't really need the increased stability or accuracy at the target range. But more into real combat, you might want the increased stability and accuracy. And that's pretty much it. You do have a decent amount of customization with your attachments if you're better at controlling it, especially if you're on PC. You're probably going to be better at controlling it than consoles. You know, you might be able to go the higher damage attachments, but with this build being more headshot focused, I would definitely recommend having, you know, as high stability and accuracy as you can possibly get. Now, our other primary weapon is going to be Nemesis, and for the reason is because you want this holster talent. While holstered, gain plus 25% headshot damage when scoped with your current weapon. Now, the reason you're needing to use scopes that have the times at the side is because any of these scopes will give you the 25% increased headshot damage, even though scopes like this, the 3x4 and the 4x, you don't actually have to go first person and zoom down the scope, so you're not having to have, you know, that worse accuracy because you're having to look down, you know, 8x scope or something, but you're still getting that 25% increased headshot damage, which just adds a massive amount of damage. And the Nemesis sniper rifle is actually really good to use on its own because it is a marksman rifle. So, you know, mods and stuff like that we get marksman rifle damage increase affects this. And a lot of bosses, especially if you're using this on like heroic or challenging, you know, strongholds or missions against bosses, you can actually like just just one-shot headshot bosses with this thing. It's actually pretty good. So if you want to use that, you can, but mainly for the holster talent. For your last weapon, it's whatever you want. It really doesn't affect anything in this build too much. I actually like the double duty. While holstered, reloading from empty gives you a 20% of your magazine back. And the reason I like to use that is you actually can run out of ammo pretty quickly with a semi-automatic marksman rifle that doesn't have that high of a, ammo capacity. With the new patch, they are going to increase the amount of ammo drops you get when you're lower ammo, so that shouldn't be an issue. And the other holstered, if you want to get something from your secondary weapon, is to get the one that removes status effects when you roll. That one's also good. I just like double-barreled shotguns as well because they're kind of useful. If stuff gets in close range, you do a pretty good amount of damage. So before we get into our gear pieces, I just want to talk about the abilities real quick. You can use absolutely anything you want. I would still recommend always using the healing chem launcher because it's just the absolute best healing thing in the game. But besides that, you can use absolutely whatever you want. If you want to, this actually does help the booster hive, even though it's kind of, a longer cooldown ability. It does give you movement speed, skill haste if you really want those, but it does increase your weapon handling by 20%, which will be really good for this weapon. That's accuracy and stability. So if you want to use that, there is that, but you can pretty much use whatever abilities you want with this build. Now, for our gear pieces, it's pretty easy to do this build. You're not going for any actual talents. As you see, I legitimately have damage to elites, and as you can tell by that, this is a more PvE focused build. It still is super good for the PvE version of the Dark Zone, but I have damage to elites on literally every piece, and I only have one other talent because my backpack isn't that great, but I have no talents. This doesn't need anything like that, and you don't need any colors, but it is mainly red. You actually do need one color thing, and that's 4 or less yellow, so you can have your ranger talent active, but besides that, there's pretty much nothing else you need. So for the helmet, you're going to want the high damage to elite roll. Having wyvern wear is decent. I have 3-piece wyvern wear. So this is an overall pretty good roll because wyvern wear does give the critical damage and chance, which is pretty nice. They're going to want the highest damage to elite roll. I'm pretty sure the highest you can possibly get is 45%. I have never gotten a roll past 42%, and this is the only roll I've gotten at 42%. Then you're going to want the hard hitting damage to elites. This just gives, so over 50% damage to elites right here, which is pretty massive. For the back piece, this is probably my worst rolled piece. I did want it because it has another wyvern wear piece, so I can get that 3 set. It does have weapon damage. You can get a lot more weapon damage. Like this one right here is 9.5%. I just can't roll this piece. So I would definitely recommend, if you can, getting a really high weapon damage roll. You can get, pretty sure you can get headshot damage on backpacks. But pretty much any reds you can get, you're going to want hard hitting. I did go wyvern wear to get that 3 set as well, which does add some decent damage. This back piece is probably one of my weakest rolled piece. It does have 3.5% weapon damage, which is okay, but it does have a utility roll as well, which isn't that great. So this is overall probably my worst rolled piece. Now for my chest piece, which is a decently rolled piece, I do have rifle damage on it, which isn't the best, but it does have 6% weapon damage, which I was able to roll up a little bit. It has 8% headshot damage, which is a pretty big increase. Then it has the 15% damage to elites again. And then it also has two defense slots, but with these generic mods I have from farming low level mods, I was able to get a 3.5% marksman rifle critical damage mod into that, and a 5% marksman rifle damage mod into that as well. So overall, these are still amazing mod slots for me. If you want to go farm low-level generic mods, you definitely can for a pretty big damage increase. The chest piece still isn't the best, but it does have some pretty decent rolls on it. I could still do quite a bit better, but overall it is still a pretty decently rolled piece. Now for my gloves, this is a decent rolled piece, but I could still do a lot better with this. I do have the 8% marksman rifle damage. The pistol damage is nothing, but instead of rolling the pistol damage to something useful, I want to roll the damage to elites onto this. This I could definitely do a lot better. You can get, I think, 13% weapon damage on one of these, so that's still a pretty big damage increase. Just having that maximum whatever, so marksman rifle damage roll on it with the damage to elites is going to be the best you can get. I'm pretty sure if I didn't have the pistol roll, I could get a mod with that roll on it. And the brand set isn't the best, but it does have the damage to elites and the marksman rifle damage, so it's not the worst thing I could have gotten. Now for my holster right here, it doesn't have a very good brand set either, but it does have the critical chance 14.5%. I think you can get 15, but that's still a really high roll. And then I have the damage to elites on it again, which the damage to elites in this build is one of the biggest damage increases, and that's always good for any PvE. A lot of people think soloing stuff, it isn't that good, but if you're doing anything that you're actually going to need insanely high damage builds, you're not going to be facing non-elite things really at all. So all the damage to elite is good. It's really good for dark zones, control point, level 3 farming, challenging and heroic, stronghold mission farming. All that stuff is going to completely utilize damage to elites. Then I have another offensive mod, but I did put another generic system mod into it, which is 5% marksman rifle damage. I definitely want to go farm on my low level more to get more of these generic mods that just have really good damage rolls you can put in any slots you want. So it's another 5% marksman rifle damage, which is really good. Then we have our knee pads, which is our third set of wyvern wear, which is really good to get that critical chance by 10%, which is pretty massive. I have critical chance by 7%. I think I've seen 7.5. I don't know if you can go up to 8 on that roll, but it's pretty good. Then it has a hard hitting, which is really good. This piece is actually probably pretty close to perfect, besides it was a 450 rolled up, so it is a really good roll overall. Then I have an offensive mod slot, which I don't have a lot of really good offensive high level mods, but I did get 1.5% weapon damage and 2.5% headshot damage, which is basically just overall damage because it is a headshot build. It's the optimal range isn't really, you're not going to really notice that since it's a marksman rifle anyway, but it does have some decent damage into this. This is probably one of the best rolled pieces. It's just overall a really good rolled piece, even though it's a lower gear score piece. So that is pretty much all of my gear pieces and my weapon pieces. So for the stats, we do that 61, almost 62,000 damage for the weapon damage. We have 31.5% critical chance, 40% critical damage. The critical chance and damage isn't the biggest part of the build, but it does add some pretty good damage when it goes off. 174% weapon damage, and that is not counting if you want to go a different scope. So if you want to go like that 45% headshot damage scope, you now have 219% headshot damage, which is pretty good, but you do lose that 5% critical damage with that one. And the elite damage, without having to aim it on the scope, is probably overall better in actual, combat fighting, especially with mobs running around or enemies running around everywhere. We do have 70% accuracy and stability on it right now, which is pretty good. Then our all weapon damage bonus is 11%, marksman rifle damage bonus is 18%, which I could do a lot better on. And then my damage to elites is a whopping 137%, which is probably close to the maximum you can get in this game. I wouldn't assume you can go over 150% or something like that. So that's pretty massive. That's where a lot of our damage is coming from. It is a pretty squishy build, but I'm not, really using it in anything that I am going to need some insane amount of tankiness. PvE, your tankiness really doesn't matter that much, and I'm not really using this for PvP at all. But for our specialization, we're using the sharpshooter for pretty clear reasons. We do have the 25% headshot damage, which is a headshot build, so it's pretty massive. It does have that digital scope, which is the 45% headshot damage. If you want to use that, It is a longer range scope, but it does give that massive headshot damage increase. Then a 30% reload speed increase, just overall really good. Then 30% increased weapon stability, which is also massive for this build. So you're definitely going to need this specialization. It's just overall the best. And, you know, the 30% stability, 25% headshot damage, just massive increases overall for this build. So that is the entire build. Let me know what you guys think about this build in the comments. Subscribe if you want to see more Division 2 content. Leave a like if you like the video. Again, leave a comment what you think about Division 2 as a whole, what you think about this build, if you guys are running this build, how you like it, and thanks for watching.
Landmark engaged. Now detecting contaminated gear. Detecting additional hostile contacts. Detecting additional hostile contacts. Pin them. Throwing out a frag. Contaminated gear detected. Now detecting contaminated gear. Give me a reload. Extraction helo almost within range. Landmark has been cleared. Landmark spotted. Engaging landmark.